You're watching the legal breakdown. Obviously, some major news here. Donald Trump is the first former president in American history to be indicted in New York. Glenn, what's next for Trump here?
So hopefully what's next for Donald Trump is accountability, and what's next for the American people is justice, because we've been waiting a very long time for Donald Trump to be held accountable for just some of his crimes. So procedurally, here's what we can expect. He will be booked. That is the first thing that police departments, prosecutors do after somebody has been indicted. They will be arrested and they will be booked. What booking involves is the police will sit down with Donald Trump. I'm sure he will negotiate a voluntary turn-in, a voluntary surrender, and he'll come in with his lawyers. He will have to answer booking questions. The police will gather up basic biographical information, address information, employment information, all of which may sound silly because we kind of know all these things already. But you know that the police department will want to go through its standard procedures. After they're done collecting all that information up from Donald Trump, they will fingerprint him. They will take an arrest photo, what we often refer to as a mugshot. And although strictly speaking, that's not a matter of public record, I will say that generally police will release mugshots for any number of reasons. They're entitled to do it. I can't imagine that we won't be seeing a Donald Trump mugshot shortly after he is booked by the police. After that, he will be presented in court. The first court date after you've been indicted is called an arraignment. And so he'll be brought before a judge. As I teach my GW criminal justice students all the time, that is the first eyeball to eyeball between a defendant and the judge. And that's when it typically becomes very real, that you have now earned a new title, and that title is defendant. The judge will do a couple of things. The judge will make sure the indictment is in order, and he will formally put Donald Trump on notice of the charges against him. That's often accomplished by reading the indictment. Now, what I will say is 99 times out of 100, the first thing the defense attorney will do is say, "Your Honor, my client waives the reading of the indictment," rather than, forcing the defendant to go through the painful exercise of sitting there and listening to everything that the grand jury has indicted him for. They will probably waive reading of the indictment. They will set a status hearing date, which will be the next court date. They probably will not set a trial date. That the trial date will be set at one of these interim status hearings. And then probably something we've all been wondering about: what happens to Donald Trump pending trial? The judge will have a couple of decisions to make. Will he put Donald Trump on release, what we call PR, personal recognizance, or ROR, release on recognizance? And if he does put Donald Trump on release, what kind of conditions might a judge set? Will the judge, for example, try to prohibit Donald Trump from engaging in inflammatory speech that could either, incite people to violence, or could be an effort to poison the jury pool? Because there will be a jury picked now that will sit as the conscience of the community and judge Donald Trump. So I suspect you may hear the prosecutors ask for some sort of minimal conditions of release that are designed to prevent Donald Trump from engaging in the kind of reckless, inflammatory speech that we have seen him engage in. I think the worst example of that is what he said on January 6th that inspired a violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. The prosecutors might also ask for some travel restrictions. It would not surprise me if the prosecutors asked the court to prohibit Donald Trump from leaving the United States. One way to accomplish that is to have the judge order that Donald Trump surrender his passport. But of course, Donald Trump has his own plane, so maybe he could be flown out of the country without a passport. So I suspect these things will be raised by the prosecutors. What I don't expect to see, Brian, is for the prosecutors to ask for pretrial detention, to detain Donald Trump pending trial. I think that, it's all but a foregone conclusion that we're not going to see that kind of request. What I will say is when prosecutors make a request to detain somebody pending trial, there are only two reasons you can request detention. One is if the person is a flight risk, and other sort of incremental steps, surrendering a passport, ordering the person not to leave the state, not to leave the jurisdiction, not to leave the United States. If a judge concludes that all of those other lesser forms of restraint are insufficient to assure the defendant will reappear at the next court hearing, then the court could decide to confine him pending trial. We're not going to see that. The second basis that a judge can use to jail somebody pending trial is if the judge concludes that person is a danger to the community. Again, I don't suspect you're even going to see the prosecutors make a request for detention. And even if they did, I can't imagine a judge would order the detention of a former president. That would conjure up all sorts of safety issues that the system may not be prepared to tackle at this moment, though once Donald Trump goes to trial, if he gets convicted and sentenced to prison, well, then obviously law enforcement authorities and prison authorities are going to have to make arrangements to make sure Donald Trump can serve his sentence safely.
Now, with regard to the arraignment and subsequent hearings, is any of that going to be open to the public? Are we going to be able to see it on television? Are only reporters going to be allowed in the room? How does that work?
So the Constitution requires criminal trials to be public. So every single court hearing will be public. I suspect there will be a keen interest in everybody attending. So what often happens is there will be a packed courtroom, and then most courts have accommodation for overflow courtrooms. What they do is they broadcast in closed circuit fashion whatever's going on in the courtroom in which Trump is appearing. They will broadcast it out to other courtrooms. So members of the public can go sit in adjacent courtrooms and watch what happens. Most courthouses also have media rooms, which is where I spend a lot of the time now as an MSNBC legal analyst when I'm monitoring trials. And you will get a real-time feed in the media room in the courthouse of what's going on, so that all sort of, reporters and all media outlets can have access in real time to what's going on in the courtroom, so they can broadcast it out in real time.
What about the broader public at home? Are we going to be able to follow this in any way, or is everything just closed circuit?
So ordinarily, each jurisdiction has its own rules about whether they allow cameras in the courtroom. I've never practiced in New York. My recollection is they don't allow cameras in the courtroom, but I would have to confirm that. But here's the other thing. It may be that a trial of this consequence, the first trial of a former president of the United States, may prompt the jurisdiction to say, this is of such searing public interest, indeed world interest, that they may consider amending their rules and allowing cameras in the courtroom if they don't otherwise allow cameras in the courtroom.
Got it. So that still remains to be seen. Glenn, just gaming this out way into the future, if Donald Trump is convicted, what are his appeal options?
So, ordinarily when people are convicted, even of minor crimes, the defense attorney will automatically file a notice of appeal just to preserve the defendant's right to appeal their conviction in the event there was any deficiency in the trial that worked to the prejudice of the defendant. So he will certainly, I am sure, if he's convicted, avail himself of every opportunity to appeal it up through the highest court in New York. And then there is also an opportunity to jump collaterally into the federal system under certain circumstances. But I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves until we kind of see precisely what charges the New York grand jury has indicted Trump on, because presently it remains under seal. The reporting is he has been indicted, but we don't yet know what the charges are.
Okay, and we will find those charges out at the arraignment. When can we expect the arraignment to happen?
So I have a feeling the district attorney and the NYPD and other law enforcement agencies are probably going to want to make sure there's a whole bunch of security in place in case Donald Trump now posts, "Come to Manhattan for my arraignment will be wild."
Right.
He's kind of made other noises like that, posted other things saying, "I'm about to be arrested, protest, 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 take our nation back." He hasn't learned the lessons of January 6th when he engaged in similarly reckless and inciting language, because he's doing it all over again. So I have a feeling they will want all of the security measures in place that they feel are necessary before they then set the arraignment date and have him come in for his first court appearance.
Okay. And Glenn, just one more question. Let's end on this. Can I just get your thoughts on this? I mean, you and I, we've had over 40 episodes of our show. I know that you've been interested in this kind of thing for much longer than just our legal breakdown series. Can I just have your thoughts on this? I mean, this is kind of an unprecedented historic moment that we're in right now. A former president of the United States has been criminally indicted. We've been seeking accountability for I mean, for this case specifically, years. What are your thoughts on all of this?
My thoughts are that this has been a long time coming. Donald Trump has committed crimes in the harsh light of day, and he's gotten away with all of them up until this moment. So March 30th, 2023 is a day that will go into the history books as not only the first time a former president has been indicted criminally, but sort of the first step toward accountability for Donald Trump and his crimes in a very real sense against we the people, against the American people. Because if this indictment includes crimes surrounding his hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, which were designed to bury information, to hide it, to secrete it from the American voters, to basically rob us of the full value of our vote. This is a really important step, in the direction of accountability. And perhaps even more importantly, it will serve as a deterrent. I mean, gone are the days now when people can say there's no precedent for a former president of the United States being indicted for his crimes. No one can ever make that argument again. So I think this is, frankly, an important step for our nation to sort of strengthen our republic, to prove that it's not just a hollow saying that no person is above the law. And, an indictment is never a celebratory affair, but I think the American people can take comfort and pride in the fact that even a former president can and will be held accountable for his crimes.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Obviously, for anybody watching, there is a lot to follow in this case as we head toward the arraignment, all of the pretrial motions and hearings, and then, of course, the trial itself, along with the other cases where Trump is awaiting indictment in Fulton County, Georgia, and at the DOJ. So for anybody that wants to keep on top of legal news, make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.